Melissa James is an indie documentary filmmaker that is quickly making a name for herself in Vancouver. With the success of her film Shake, Rattle and Roll, James has moved on to her next project, No Fun City. This latest film focuses on musicians, artists, and club owners who are trying to keep Vancouver's subculture alive. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks.
Yeah, it's great. So, I want to start with your first film. It was a little bit a while back, but it's a very interesting thing, Rockabilly. What is a rockabilly?
I guess rockabilly is the music before anything else. I mean, now it's considered a style. It's the way people dress. It's, you know, you've seen like the hairstyle. It's
the 1950s. They're kind of trapped in that world, aren't they?
Yeah, kind of. I think it's people that have a strong appreciation for it. So people that love the music that came out in that era. They love the clothing. They love the cars, and they love how people lived back then. And it's kind of the way to revitalize that culture.
It's very interesting. You have I have a clip from your film, Shake, Rattle and Roll, that really talks. One of the people we're talking to here explains kind of what it is. Let's take a look at the clip here. Shake, Rattle and Roll.
When people don't know what rockabilly is, I ask them if they know what Elvis sounds like, and I go from there.
Rockabilly came from originally hillbilly music, basically. So anything that's like down home, got that rootsy kind of feeling, it can fall into all those genres, right? Between country blues or rockabilly.
You take an old Johnny Cash song or you take an old Hank Williams song and you play it 100 miles an hour, and that would be a nutshell description of it.
It's a very cool kind of feel when you meet people like this and they're into the music, and the cars are huge, aren't they?
Yeah, that's a huge part of the lifestyle. It's like basically anything that came about back then. So it's like it's vintage.
Right.
It's, I think the cars came about, if you watch the film, it was a post-war thing, and it was a gang thing, and it was something that people got really into.
Right.
And people share that love of that. Like now, especially in the West Coast, I'm from the East Coast, where the cars don't last as long.
Okay.
So when I moved out here, I was just blown away by how many cars are in such beautiful condition and how much work people still put into them.
Well, I guess what fascinates me about this is that there's a group of people, and we're not talking about like a few, hundreds, even thousands of people in the West Coast and around the world that have kind of said, this is what's going to define me, my life, how I live, how I dress. It's an incredible subculture, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that was why I chose that subject, because I really wanted to explore like why, like where do all these traditions come from, and what is it about these traditions that people seem to be like so hooked onto. And I think one thing that we came to the conclusion we came up with was it was kind of a purer time. It was a simpler time and a more honest time maybe in certain respects. And there's a lot of people who maybe, the world we live in right now and the technology and all the things that we deal with, maybe that's not what they relate to. So that was interesting. And the purity of the music,
There's a simple rhythm, a simple beat, and they like that. They buy into that. And people will raise their kids like this. It's quite something.
Yeah, especially if you go like stateside, it's very Americana. It's very like American traditional, like the tattooing and all that style. So I personally think it's beautiful. Like, the aesthetic of that really appeals to me.
There's a very cool appeal to it in the art and how all the hand painted stuff they do on cars. It's really fascinating thing. So Rockabilly, interesting film. But your latest film is also, I want to talk about that, No Fun City. First of all, take me into this. What kind of got you off on this idea of saying, I want to explore the art scene in Vancouver that I think is maybe disappearing?
I think it's a tough question.
Yeah.
When it started out, obviously I have a big love for music and for subcultures, which I find really interesting. I was a music publicist. All the films and all the projects I try and work on somehow relate to music, and it's something that I think is really important in a society, in a culture. And when I started looking at Vancouver's music scene, I noticed that a lot of the bands that I liked that came out of here, say like DOA or Skinny Puppy or that really old school kind of punk sound, they weren't so much apparent in the mainstream. It took me a while to find where I could hear bands that were kind of like that. There's the Cobalt, and there's these venues like these mainstays of Vancouver punk rock that have always been there, but I found a whole bunch of other kind of more alternative places to hear really great bands. And then started to realize that it's not an easy thing to open a music venue in this city at all.
Really?
And that was what led to kind of furthering the project and trying to discover what the reasons were for, the difficulties venue owners faced and promoters faced, and realize that, there's a lot there.
We're going to show a clip from your film, No Fun City, and then I'll get you to comment on it. So here's a clip from No Fun City.
Vancouver is a very kind of dark and brooding city, and a lot more music like that should have come out of here. And I think it still does. I think there's still an undercurrent of that here. And I mean, I feel it every time I walk around. I feel that, and it's kind of what I like about this city in a lot of ways.
In the scene, there seems to be a lot of bands with passion and people with drives, but there are bars getting shut down left and right, or changing to just dance, right? And there's no place for live music.
Any place that's artistic, that has a liquor license, is going to get grief from the city.
They'll let certain areas of the city go, do whatever they want and have extended hours.
You know, one of the things that jumps out at me from the clip is this idea of live music. I mean, you obviously have a passion for music, but is part of your interest in this topic is saying, in a city like Vancouver that the world is watching, and the Olympics are coming, you would think that there would be tons of venues for these alternative kind of musicians to be able to explore their craft, and you're saying it's really hard for them to find a place. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think once we started exploring the subject, we realized that, I mean, there are some venues, the venues do have trouble staying open. There's a different kind of entertainment that appeals to different kinds of people. So although there are things like the Granville Entertainment District, and there are big clubs in the city that cater to a lot of people, there aren't necessarily spaces for everyone. And if you want to be, somewhere off the beaten path, or if you want to, have a club or a music venue on a different street or in a different zoning area, then you're going to have trouble. And a lot of.
But why trouble? Like, I don't understand that. It seems like, just hey, if there's an interest in it, you'd you'd apply for a license and you just get a facility.
Yeah, well, applying for the license can become a huge issue.
Is it a political thing? Are you saying the city council saying we don't like this type of music?
I mean, we don't. That's a big question too. I mean, I don't know if it's the type of music. I think from the city's standpoint, they want to keep things pretty controlled, and they don't like the idea perhaps of having venues or parties that are outside this area that they're policing. I mean,
which is like the Granville Street corridor. You kind of block off, there's the chaos.
And whereas in other cities you have, I mean, places all over a city, say like for, New York or Montreal, for instance, there isn't like one section where you're allowed to have clubs and nightlife, and other sections where you aren't. There's kind of like it meshes together a bit more. And I think that if you want to have a space that has multi-use, so you could be a gallery or music or whatever, in other cities it's much easier than it is here. And that's why it's hard for someone to open a music venue or an art gallery and keep it, like, have it survive.
So what, in essence, I mean, if you kind of could step back from some of your work right now and say, here's what makes a city fun for you. Like, what is it? As you're looking across Canada, you visit a lot of cities, you grew up in the East Coast. So what for you says this is what makes a city work, what makes it alive, what makes it fun?
I think freedom. I think the freedom of choice to do what you want when you want as much as possible. And I think that's what separates having a good time from really, like, being creative and fostering creativity. And I think something like the Granville Entertainment District is fine for a certain type of people, but I like the freedom to choose like where and when I can go out. And I think that needs to be, it needs to be allowed more.
What's the funnest city you've been to?
New York City.
Really? Just because it's so, I mean, you're talking about something that's so massive, though, that you're able to find a million different little things.
Well, exactly. And because of that, there's a neighborhood for everyone. And every neighborhood has its spot for nightlife, and every district in New York, I mean, if you go, you can find something for, like, if you want to go to some nice, fancy restaurant, you can go to the Upper West Side, and there's clubs that people like the kind of music they play up there. And then you've got the Lower East Side, and you've got, the dirtier, kind of more rock and roll places that are down there. And, Vancouver could have a similar thing where each kind of person that flocks to their kind of, neighborhood where people are into what they're into also has a bit of nightlife, whereas as it is now, it's kind of segregated, and everyone is expected to kind of push into this one section, and they might not all like it there.
So what, I mean, what can be done? I mean, you're making this film, obviously, to bring awareness and to allow some of these club owners who are taking risks to maybe get some people behind them to say, hey, we're on board. But what can be done? How do you make Vancouver more fun?
I think people are trying, and I think that one thing we've noticed throughout the course of doing the film is that in City Council, people are really trying to make a difference, and they have heard what people are saying. They've heard the complaints, and they're trying to open it up a little bit so that maybe some of the laws that were put in place can be revised, or, you know, so that we can look at things as it develops now. Maybe they'll be taking a bigger interest on the side of these club owners and promoters, like you said.
For you, what's the funnest place to go in Vancouver for your passions, your interests?
I mean, I love all kinds of places. I love the Cobalt, but I love the Rickshaw that just opened. That's a new venue that David Dupree just opened, and I mean, it's fantastic. It's a fantastic new spot, and you should check it out.
Very fun. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks for coming on the show. It was really great meeting you. All the best in your film, No Fun City. Make sure you check it out. Coming up, I meet an economist who says our world's about to change because of the cost